Hi, everyone. I am excited you are here today to learn a little more about the importance of evaluating teachers. We are going to be looking at teacher evaluations through the lens of the law and see how that impacts policies we must follow as leaders in our building. Looking at how teachers have been evaluated historically is a great place to start. Prior to the 1990s, teachers were evaluated based more on subjective observation than instructional quality or student outcomes. In fact, the methods used varied greatly from one school to another and from one district or state to another. There was a high level of inconsistency with this method of evaluation. Beginning in the 1990s, and particularly with the passage of No Child Left Behind in 2001, Georgia began to work toward uniformity and improvements with rigor in evaluations. At this time, there was still no statewide framework for evaluation. Then in 2010, Race to the Top offered financial incentives to states to reform and innovate their educational systems. The Teacher Keys Effectiveness System, or TEKS, was developed by the state of Georgia using Race to the Top incentives. From the start, concern over the weight of student test scores was an issue for teachers. This pushback helped shape updates to the teacher effectiveness measures and TEKS evaluation system. And then COVID hit, and the state suspended formal evaluations. In the years since COVID, adjustments have been made to refocus teacher evaluation on instructional improvement. All that said, it has taken us years to get in a groove with teacher evaluations, and we still combat the gotcha mindset. How we approach teacher evaluation has everything to do with how teachers feel about their craft. Race to the Top revolutionized teacher evaluation in Georgia. This initiative was launched in 2009 2010 through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Race to the Top used competitive federal grants to drive sweeping education reform by encouraging states to adopt policies aligned with federal priorities. Georgia received a $400 million grant through Race to the Top. A major area of impact was teacher evaluation because Race to the Top required states to develop systems that incorporated student achievement data, most often standardized test scores, into annual teacher evaluations. This led to the widespread adoption of value added models and more formalized observation protocols. Many states, like Georgia, overhauled their evaluation frameworks to include multiple performance ratings and linked evaluations to decisions about professional development, tenure, and even compensation. While these changes brought increased attention to instructional quality and accountability, they also generated a significant amount of controversy, with critics arguing that their emphasis on test based metrics created pressure on teachers, narrowed the curricula that was being taught, and undermined staff morale. Overall, Race to the Top significantly reshaped how teachers were assessed, laying the groundwork for a more data driven approach to evaluating educator effectiveness, not only in Georgia, but across the United States. Georgia developed Code Section 20 2 210 to meet the requirements of the Department of Education's demands from the Race to the Top grant. This statute required that Georgia teachers and leaders undergo annual performance evaluations that integrate multiple measures, including student growth based on achievement data, observations based on performance standards, and professional growth goals. Districts were required to use these annual evaluations to inform critical employment decisions like teacher retention, promotion, opportunities, and teacher certification. In practice, this statute drove policy shifts in schools, and while intended to support teacher development and ensure accountability, the system faced pushback from practitioners with concerns focused on the high weight that was associated with student growth, which was set at 50% of the overall teacher evaluation. As a result, in 2013, state legislators added the 90% rule to the statute. This rule helped to ensure some fairness and stipulated that a student had to be in a teacher's class for at least 90% of the course to count for the teacher's evaluation results. Starting in 2015, the Georgia Department of Education began using the Teacher Keys Effectiveness Systems, or TEKS, and LEAKS for leaders. Concerns from educators rang out across the state, and momentum continued to grow about using student test scores as such a heavy component for teacher evaluations, as they are outside a teacher's control. Again, legislators listened, and in 2016, Georgia's Senate Bill 364 passed. This legislation was able to keep TEKS, but significantly overhauled teacher evaluation policy by reducing the weight of state-based tests and the student growth component in evaluations, which dropped from 50% to 30%. It also mandated a reduced number of observations for veteran teachers that had high performance ratings, and allowed districts a little bit more flexibility for locally designed growth measures. Because of these changes, educators experienced less testing pressure. Evaluations incorporated a broader amount of evidence beyond assessments, and seasoned teachers gained some autonomy through fewer mandated observations. Even more recent impacts to teacher evaluations include Senate Bill 367, disruptions caused by COVID-19, and the potential enactment of House Bill 1295. Senate Bill 367 initially reduced the number of state-mandated standardized tests, aiming for a more balanced and professional growth-centered system. But nothing could have prepared us for what happened when the COVID pandemic hit and the disruption that it caused in schools. This was really significant. It halted standardized assessments and formal teacher evaluations. In the aftermath of COVID, House Bill 1295 seeks to reevaluate teacher evaluation procedures, potentially granting more control and flexibility. This shift reflects a broader trend of moving away from rigid accountability measures toward a more adaptive, supportive TEKS framework. The significant changes to teacher evaluation in the state of Georgia over the past 20 years have set the stage for how we currently evaluate teachers in our buildings. The TEKS evaluation continues to have an impact. TEKS consist of 3 parts that are calculated into a teacher's annual evaluation. You have the teacher assessment based on performance standards, or TAPS piece, which has a weight of 50%, the professional growth piece, which is weighted at 20%, and student growth, which makes up 30%. Supportive and coaching measures are pushed out throughout the year, with a mid-year evaluation conference in December and a summative evaluation conference in the timeframe from April to May. The goals of teacher effectiveness measures, or TEM, is to improve teacher effectiveness and consistency as seen through the totality of evidence by the time of the summative evaluation. This ongoing collection of evidence is not just from observations, but can also include data shared by the teacher demonstrating their performance that an evaluator might not directly observe. A key piece that had been added over time is support offered at the school level through coaching or mentoring. So now that we have looked at the history of teacher evaluation and some of the specific laws and policies regarding the push to reform how teacher evaluations are conducted, it's important to think about why we evaluate teachers as administrators. Truly, educator evaluations play a critical role in maintaining the quality of instruction, as school leaders are legally obligated under ESSA and Georgia Code Section 20-2-210 to ensure instructional standards are met and staff effectiveness is upheld. Teacher effectiveness is tied directly to student achievement metrics, such as the College and Career Ready Performance Index, or as we call it in schools, CCRPI. Evaluation data helps identify instructional strengths and finds gaps, enabling schools to provide targeted student support. Teacher evaluations also drive school improvement by fostering a culture of continuous growth, boosting staff morale, and supporting the retention of effective teachers. Early identification of struggling educators allows for timely intervention through coaching and support plans. And finally, conducting evidence based evaluations ensures compliance with federal and state laws, including IDEA and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which upholds both legal and ethical responsibilities that we have in education. We know that a lot rides on how we go about conducting teacher evaluations. So, just as a cautionary look, I wanted to present some cases where evaluations became part of a legal battle. So, the first case I'm going to share is Sigmund versus DeKalb County School District. Sigmund was employed by DeKalb from 1999 until 2016. In 2016, Sigmund resigned from her position. Then in 2018, Sigmund applied for reemployment with DeKalb and learned that her application might be red flagged because she had received an unsatisfactory evaluation for the 2014-2015 school year. In this case, the teacher alleged that her due process rights were violated when the school district decided not to renew her teaching contract. She claimed that the non-renewal was based on inaccurate and unfair evaluations, that she was not given a meaningful opportunity to respond or improve. The school district contended that Sigmund was a non-tenured teacher and therefore not entitled to the same procedural protections as tenured teachers. The court ultimately ruled in favor of the school district, reinforcing that non-tenured teachers do not have property interest in continued employment under the 14th Amendment and thus are not entitled to full due process hearings unless state law provides otherwise. This case reminds us that as administrators, we must strictly adhere to state and district policies for due process. Evaluations must be well documented and supported by evidence. Though not legally required, giving teachers an opportunity to improve can oftentimes prevent disputes like this. The next case is King versus the Board of Education. The teacher King sought a writ of mandamus to compel the Board of Education of the City of Beaufort to retain and renew her contract in her capacity as band director. King contended that the board's decision not to reassign her as the school's band director after having assigned those duties to her for the previous 4 years was a demotion. Within the meaning of the law, of the fair dismissal law, King claimed her non-renewal was arbitrary and capricious and that she had a right to due process protections. The Georgia Appellate Court ruled that since King was a non-tenured teacher and therefore she did not have property interest in continued employment under Georgia law, therefore she was not entitled to a due process hearing before the non-renewal of her contract. The court emphasized that as long as the board's decision was not made for an illegal reason, such as discrimination or retaliation, it had broad discretion in non-renewing probationary teachers. This case reminds us that as administrators, our work with evaluations can support or fail to support a decision not to renew a teacher's contract, particularly for non-tenured probationary teachers. Performance evaluations can provide a professional basis for employment decisions. Okay, the next case is Fulton County School District versus Hirsch. Hirsch was a tenured teacher. She showed a YouTube clip of an R-rated movie in her social studies class. It was a 7th grade class. After a parent complaint, the school asked the teacher to resign based upon her failure to obtain parental consent prior to showing the clip in her classroom. The district informed Hirsch that she was being charged with insubordination and willful neglect of her duties. Hirsch exercised her right to fair dismissal, having a hearing before a tribunal, but her employment was still terminated. Hirsch contested the non-renewal, arguing that the district had not followed the legally required teacher evaluation procedures outlined in Georgia law and local board policy. She claimed that the school district's failure to conduct proper evaluations invalidated the decision to non-renew her contract. The court sided with Hirsch, ruling that the district had failed to comply with those procedures required by the Georgia Fair Dismissal Act. As a result, the non-renewal decision was reversed. This case reminds us that as administrators, documenting performance is not enough. We must conduct evaluations with proper procedures. Otherwise, we may lose the ability to act on poor performance when it occurs. In the last case, Moore versus Cobb County School District 2021, a teacher challenged the validity of her performance evaluations under Georgia's Teacher Keys Effectiveness System, or TEKS, arguing the evaluation was based on isolated incidents rather than consistent performance and was not conducted in accordance with required procedures. The court emphasized that while TEKS is a valid evaluation system, it must be applied consistently and based on the totality of evidence, not selectively. The case underscored that procedural fidelity is critical, and discrepancies or perceived bias in evaluation practices can lead to legal challenges. For administrators, this highlights the importance of adhering strictly to evaluation protocols, documenting performance comprehensively. Can't just have that one time. And ensuring evaluations are fair, consistent, and free of discriminatory impact. In developing a leadership action checklist for teacher evaluation, several factors were taken into consideration. First, who needs to complete the task, what the task involves, and the timeline associated with TEKS for that task, because TEKS has some very specific timeframes that we must adhere to when we're doing evaluations. This one-pager is the leadership action checklist for completing teacher evaluations that I developed. This checklist is designed for school-level admin members that will be conducting TEKS evaluations. The timeline on the checklist shows how aspects of the evaluation process take place throughout the school year. The specific tasks to be completed are broken into 4 distinct parts, each with components for completion, and you get to check them off as you go. First, the components include the pre-work that the admin team does before the evaluation process. The second part has to do with setting expectations with staff, making sure that everybody understands exactly what has to happen throughout the evaluation process, which goes throughout the entire school year. The third part is collecting evidence, which includes walkthroughs, which are 10-minute observations pinpointing just 3 performance standards. You have formative observations, which are 30 minutes in length on all performance standards, and there are 10 total. And then last, the summative evaluation and conference that occur at the end of the year. And this last part focuses on the totality of evidence collected. Using this checklist helps to ensure, as administrators, we've done our due diligence in conducting teacher evaluations that drive school improvement, retain the best teaching staff, and are in compliance with federal and state laws to ensure that we are upholding both legal and ethical responsibilities in our buildings. All right, here are the resources that I consulted when researching laws, policies, court decisions, and evaluation processes for this presentation. And lastly, thank you for your time. I hope you learned something from the presentation, and I wonder if you have any questions. Please don't hesitate to ask.